Welcome to episode 5 of Banking Blueprints. In this penultimate episode of season 1, host Dharmesh Mistry chats with Kam Chana, head of product experience at London Stock Exchange. Dharmesh and Kam discuss how banks can drive meaningful growth through a customer-centric approach to innovation. They will also cover the rise of digital nomads and the need for inclusive solutions. Enjoy the episode and stay tuned for our season 1 finale coming soon.
Welcome to Banking Blueprints podcast with Zafin and me, your podcast host, Dharmesh Mistry. Throughout this inaugural season, we'll delve into the realms of banking innovation, exploring strategies for breaking free from traditional constraints and innovating beyond the core. This week's special guest is Kam Chana, who has made a successful career out of driving innovation in financial services giants like BlackRock, Fidelity and Barclays. And I've had the great pleasure of working with Kam at core banking vendor Temenos, and have to say her passion and focus on innovation is extremely inspiring. So I'm really excited to have her on the show and discuss how banks can drive innovation, what holds them back, and everything around innovation. But firstly, I'd like Kam to give you guys a bit of an introduction about herself and say a little bit about why you focus on innovation so much, Kam.
Hi, good morning, Dom. Thank you so much for having me. It's genuinely a pleasure to be here and to be in a conversation with you, of all people. I do listen to a lot of your podcasts, so it thrills me, and I feel very privileged that I'm now your guest, which is very exciting. My story in innovation, it feels like a long devotion to innovation throughout my entire career, which started way back in the dot-com boom, where I very luckily landed on my feet at a company that was just smashing it at the time, Charles Schwab, and learned very quickly how important it was to put the human at the center of everything you're doing as an organization. And that really was where I cut my teeth as someone who understood how design worked with business objectives and worked with technology objectives and worked with the general growth of an organization. I got trained in design thinking back then, but was never brave enough to call myself a designer. And I used design as that bridge between business and tech. And it worked so well at Schwab. I used it as a framework throughout the rest of my career. When I moved to Fidelity, BlackRock, Barclays, RBS at the time, NatWest now, a small hedge fund in Switzerland where we'd had some really, really good fun doing amazing things. But it's always been the same framework and the same approach to innovation, which is putting the human at the center of what we're trying to do as an organization. Right the way up to more recent history where we met at Temenos, where we did some great work together. And now more recently, I've been educating on design in financial services at the RCA, where I'm still currently a visiting lecturer. But over the past couple of years, I set up a lab which looked at where we really need to focus our attention when it comes to innovating in financial services, which I can talk to later. And now to continue my journey into innovation, I'm at the London Stock Exchange Group, where I'm focusing on the product experience around delivering tools around analytics and AI. So the journey continues. It's a lifelong devotion by the sounds of things for me. And I can honestly say I'm as thrilled to be in it now as I was back in the late 1990s, early 2000s.
I mean, I genuinely say that it's inspiring that even in what little spare time you must have, you're spending time on innovation, and bringing students up to speed with the process. Because, I mean, you've got an immense amount of experience in this space. And I genuinely don't know anyone that's done more on innovation than you. So it's a real honor to have you on the show and, to cover this topic. And who's the best expert I could think of? Well, it was you, right? So my first question really is really, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, right? But I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, do you think banks are held back on innovation? And if you do, then, what do you think holds them back?
Yeah, I think it's a fundamental question that we should really sort of pause and think more about. And I think if I may take a step back first and just talk about the word innovation, because I think that in itself is a little bit problematic. Innovation is such a misunderstood term and such a loaded term as well. You ask half a dozen people in your network what they mean by innovation, and some might say AI, some might say Horizon 3 thinking, some might say disruption, some might say just getting the basics right, and they would all be right. Because the reality of innovation is that it's growth. So if you replace the word innovation in every organization with how do we grow as an organization, then it becomes real. Then it becomes table stakes. Whereas a lot of the time, innovation feels like it sits in a different team, in a cool part of the city with people wearing cool clothes, and talking in sort of design language that nobody understands. And that's not really what innovation is. Innovation is growth, first and foremost. Grow your product, grow your offering, grow your value. And how do you grow that value? You grow it based on what people need, what your target market that you might have chosen 2 years ago or 25 years ago. What is it that they need, and how has life changed, and how has business changed, so that we can adapt to what they need? So I think based on that definition, I think a lot of banks are missing a trick on how to grow. And a lot of innovation can be seen as theatrical, can be seen as nice to haves, can be seen as theoretically interesting, but in the real world, it's never actually going to generate revenue. But I think there's so much opportunity for banks to innovate that if innovation as a concept and growth as a concept isn't integrated in the day-to-day, then I think it's such a lost opportunity for so many banks.
See, this is what I love about you, is that, even something like innovation, which we all think we understand, you actually explain it in a really simple way. And it's really precise, because I like the fact that you focus on growth, because you're right. A lot of us, tend to think of innovation as doing something that's kind of new and funky, but doesn't necessarily have any benefits to anyone, right? It's just doing something different. So the focus on growth is really good, because I think also, banks sometimes tend to shy away from innovation, not seeing any benefits from it. So, if the benefit is growth, then absolutely they're going to do more of it. So, I mean, I guess, once we understand what innovation is, how should a bank go about driving innovation and doing it properly then?
Now, there's a loaded question. I could possibly start with how not to do it properly, and that would be to go off and think about the tech first. And I say that with great love and admiration for all of my tech colleagues around the world. But I've seen it over and over again that a lot of the time innovation starts with there's some new tech out there. There's the internet. Let's do something with it. There's mobile. Let's do something with it. And now there's AI. Let's do something with it. And that's great. And that's a really nice starting point sometimes for innovating. But then you're effectively that hammer looking for a nail. You're looking for a use case. And then, we're sort of out hunting for use cases for a particular technology. And that's fine too. But it's a much harder way of getting to real innovation. So I would say that the right way is not to start with the tech. And it's not necessarily even to start with trying to just find use cases. It's to start with trying to understand who your customers are. Like, Simon Sinek talks about the big why. Why are we even here? Who are our customers? What are they struggling with? And why are we serving them? What is it that we've got that gives them greater value than anyone else could? So it all starts with the customer. And I would even strip back the word customer to the person that you're trying to serve. A lot of the time people talk about human-centered design, and I think that's great, but the word human becomes so broad and generic, no one really knows what to do with it. But if you strip back your business model to the person who is actually using your service, who is getting value from it, who is that person? What are they trying to do? What's keeping them awake at night? What's causing them pain? What's stopping them from getting their job done in a way that they want to do it? And what does good look like for them? We rarely ask those questions. We quite often make a lot of assumptions that we know who our segments are. But those assumptions, as small as they might seem, are what trips us up over time, because they grow like a snowball effect, and then they become indoctrinated in organizations that this is the way people use our product. We know that. We understand our customers. But I would say month after month after month, you should be in front of your actual users and future users, understanding their value system, their job, their workflows, their inquiries, how they're operating in their world to get their job done. That's where we fit in as people who are delivering value and delivering a service. So start with the person you're serving, and then start to understand the technology layers and the business layers that sit around that in order to distribute that value to them. And there's a final wrapper around all of this, which at my time at Temenos was fascinating, because I was gifted the time to go away and speak to so many banks around the world and understand why their innovation wasn't working. And there was an insight that really was so obvious that it blew my mind that we didn't realize this sooner. And it was culture. It was the internal culture that stopped banks and organizations in general from innovating. Because you can come up with you can understand your customers, the person you're designing for. You can design an amazing solution for them. You can work with product to understand how we're going to get it to market. But if the rest of the organization isn't set up in a way to change the narrative on what we're now delivering, well, then you get stuck in this sort of legacy mode, a term we use often in our industry, of this is the way we've always done things, and therefore this is the way we're going to continue doing things. And people might come in and try to change that, but that's risky, and we don't like risk. So we're going to unconsciously block that. And make sure that we don't bring in any risk in the way that we identify new product opportunity and take it to market. So if I were to say, what are the two biggest blockers to innovation from a cultural perspective, it's this bizarre relationship with risk, which is understandable. You want to make sure that your organization is sustainable, but it's where risk sits. And too often in most organizations, it sits at the point where you've got too many people involved, too many expensive engineers involved, you've built stuff, you've made commitments, and you've got no choice but to now deliver something. That in itself brings in risk. If you upstreamed that and did it right at the very beginning, where what you're designing is a hypothesis, and you do it in a design prototype, you do it in a way that you haven't coded a single thing. You don't make any commitments to the market, but you really test your hypothesis before you build anything. That de-risks it. And so when we hear in the market organizations like Amazon and others talking about fast failure, that's where they're failing fast. They're failing fast way upstream, where it's an idea, before you put any expensive engineering or product management resource or deployment resource anywhere near it. And that's where the whole concept of service design is so powerful, because it can take an idea and in a very short space of time, it can prove if that idea has value to your end users, if it has value to the business, and whether it can be built. And that's pretty powerful. So that's the one feature of a culture that keeps tripping us up. The other feature is this organizational structure that is always siloed.
Yeah.
So this kind of siloed, waterfall, handy-offy kind of culture, which is, one party does something and hands it off to another party, hands it off to another party. And that in itself creates risk of, what are we handing off? So multidisciplinary teams right from the get-go, right from the very point at which we think we've identified a challenge in the market that we want to respond to, get tech, business, design, risk, legal, compliance, get everyone together and discuss it and talk about it and hypothesize it together, design it together. And then once everyone has a clear understanding of what the human need is and what the challenge is that we're trying to solve for, then bring in your culture of fast delivery to make sure that you can respond to that. But by that point, you've created a culture where everyone's talking to each other. And I was so lucky that I landed at Charles Schwab early on in my career, because they were agile with a little a. They were agile before agile became a thing. And I remember sort of most mornings sitting around a little table with the architect, with a business analyst, with a designer, with compliance, with a developer, with all the people you need to have a sensible discussion, make some decisions, and move forward. And that works. So it's real nuance on those two factors.
I mean, it's, I've sat in organizations before, and the media or the press or, the external world is saying to the CEO, oh, AI is going to change the world, therefore you must invest. And it's literally comes straight down from the CEO. What are we doing on AI? Or what are we doing because the internet's here now, etc. So I can understand that sometimes it feels like it starts with the tech, but these are the kind of trends, I guess, that have driven decisions in the past to kind of innovate on some particular technology. I mean, talking about trends, what do you see as the trends that are driving innovation right now?
Well, I think if I can just take your statement and just unpack it a little bit, I 100% agree with you that technology, these big trends coming through with technology, they are something that we should absolutely focus on and find out how to respond to. The difference is to temper those with what's going on in other parts of the world as well. So other lens, such as what is happening with real people, what are the shifting behaviors, what's happening globally, what's happening around people's movement and aging and behaviors and shifts in the way that we see and engage with the world. All of that changes. If you're a 30-year-old organization, the world has fundamentally changed over and over again since you created your original product. So to temper those technology trends with societal trends and also business trends, and this is the approach we take at the RCA when we talk to students. So I had a real challenge with students originally, which was, a lot of them were thinking fintech was all about tech, which understandably fintech is. So we talked about the future of financial services, and we talked about the future of our relationship with money. So we worked really hard to reframe what it means to look at financial services. And we carried out a piece of research with some of our professors and colleagues at the college to identify from a very societal perspective. And luckily, none of these people had ever worked in financial services before, which was refreshing. And so we explored from a societal perspective, what are the key trends? What are the key shifts in behavior in society that we need to be thinking about? And they were delightfully surprising, because you can often think it's the same stuff like, climate change and all the rest of it. And yes, it includes those, but it's way bigger. So if I can share some of those with you and your audience, I'd love to. We try and make all our research as open source as possible. So the 6 key trends, firstly, were around younger people coming through. So we did a lot of research on Gen Z broadly, and to understand what's going on with Gen Z. And the biggest challenge with Gen Z at the moment around financial services, and this might even pertain to other generations too, so none of these are specific to a demographic, is the lack of empowerment and the struggle to make choices around their financial decision making in life. So we sort of had this title, which is Gen Z and Rampant Anxiety, and how might we build resilience and help them navigate uncharted territory, the overwhelm and confusion of the current landscape that they find themselves in. We then zoomed in on, well, what does that mean in terms of a shifting behavior? They're seeking information. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So whatever the use case is, Gen Z are desperate to find the right information that can help them make decisions. And the resulting customer need is just help me get to the right information at the right time in the right way. What might that even look like? We've talked at various conferences about, concierge, a concierge service, a buddy service, a financial aid, the devil and the angel on my shoulder who are sort of constantly helping me make decisions. But when you think about AI is a perfect fit for that need. So now you have a scenario where there's a big societal shift and resulting needs and a technology trend that can actually meet it. That's a perfect scenario. Other trends that came through, if I can continue to share, there's a massive movement around migration and mobility of work. So there's a sort of this reinvention of work-life balance and work-life lifestyle in the rejection of old models of work and the traditional borders and geography based around them. So to give you an example, currently, and this is a phenomenal number, there's 35 million digital nomads around the world. Now, How often do we hear as a use case? Never. Rarely. By 2035, there'll be 1 billion digital nomads around the world.
I read about this guy in Germany that's effectively spent an entire year living on the train. He lived on a train, right? So he's got no home, but he's working as a nomad on the train during the day. Then he gets one of those sleeper trains overnight and sleeps on the train. And that's his lifestyle. That's what he say. Basically, I get to see, more of Germany, and I'm not paying bills like everyone else, right? But it's a lifestyle choice. I mean, it's totally alien to us, but this is a fundamental change. I think you're right.
It might be alien. It's alien from a sort of common perception point of view. But when you think that 35 million people are doing exactly that in some form, maybe not everyone's on a train, but in some form, everyone's, there's a 35 million person cohort out there doing this. And it's there was a really interesting survey where it said something like 86% of us want to be digital nomads, but we're not entirely sure how. So that in itself presents an incredible opportunity when you think about what are all the needs around people who are reprioritizing their lives, moving geographies, moving their families around, moving themselves around, working around different borders, and all the complexities that come out of that. So we've actually spoken to a lot of digital nomads. One of our students, Pat, she did a beautiful project on how might we serve digital nomads, which ultimately came down to a better way of identifying the credit worthiness of a digital nomad. That's generally the challenge. You live in the UK, you have a credit score, you move to Lisbon, you move to New Mexico City, you move to another part of the world. That credit scoring suddenly has no value. And she and her team created this beautiful concept of a reputee butterfly, this sort of credit score that moved around with you and captured your behavior, captured your reputation and your reputable behavior as you moved around the world to create an alternative credit score that could be used locally to open up the services that you need, be that renting an apartment or renting a car or whatever it might be. So there's another beautiful example of an incredibly large market, a now validated human need, and the tech that's available to serve it.
Fantastic. So
now move that
on. Can we kind of zip through the other four quickly?
We can zip through the other four. Okay, absolutely. Happy to. So now, in the theme of reinventing work and life, you've got this demographic shift of a growing population of older people. So that sort of cohort of people over 55 are now the biggest living cohort in, I believe it's more sort of Western hemisphere rather than Asia. So now you have a scenario where almost a third of your population is over 55, and they're getting younger. We've got this concept of the 100-year life. We're living longer. 50 is the new 40, 60 is the new 50. We're reorganizing our life priorities at later stages in life, getting married again, moving again, starting up a new business at 50 or 60 or even 70, working longer, choosing not to retire or not being able to retire, or retiring and setting up a business anyway. So So this category we generally call living again, because it feels so empowering for older people to sort of be able to make choices. Now, what's really interesting here is that lives are becoming more fractional. So I'm not retiring at 65 or 70. I might retire at 50. But I might reorganize my life so that I can start work again. And then I might have another mini retirement when I'm 60, and then another mini retirement when I'm 70. So this kind of fractional living is a trend that we notice coming out of this piece of research. And the resulting need there is this connectivity for that fractional and reevaluated living. So meet me in my life and help me streamline my life choices is becoming a pronounced human need. Area 4 is financial well-being. Now this, the cost of living crisis is sort of fits into this. And generally, what we found in the research was this lack of financial resilience to weather economic shocks and instability. So it's not that people don't have an income. It's the fact that majority of people aren't sure about whether they're able to weather any more shocks and instability. Whether you're even financially secure, you haven't quite figured out if there's another Ukraine war, if there's more political instability, can my current income actually deal with that? And the large majority of us just aren't sure. What that actually means is that we as a society need to become more agile. We need to get more comfortable with agility and be able to smartly navigate those choices and shifting norms. So if the land beneath us is going to shift more consistently than we're used to and comfortable with, how do we deal with that? And how can banks help us to deal with that? Knowing that no one's getting married at 25, having children at 30, living in a house for 40 years and retiring at 65. That's just not how it works anymore. So the overriding need that comes out of that trend is agency. Enable me to regain control. It's more than control. It's agency. Give me some control back. The fifth area is super interesting, and it can only come out of an academic institution because I thought it was going to be climate change, but they surprised me. And the trend is actually this conflict. It's a very human conflict between values and identity. So I identify as someone who cares about the environment, but I also value having my holidays every year. I also value being able to jump in a car and see my parents if I want to, or take my kids to stuff over the weekend, even though I could probably cycle them. So there's a complex tension between ourselves, other people, and the planet. And that's a very deep trend that we're seeing. And the resulting shifting behavior is a protection of your identity and your assets. So how can I feel safe as I'm having to balance my choices and do the right thing for myself, others, and the planet? Navigating those choices is becoming increasingly not only hard, but politically laden. You see this on social media playing out in the sort of the comment sections of anything around climate change. So what's the resulting need? Security. Enable me to feel safe in a complex and often threatening world. Help me to make the right choices so that I can continue to live by my own values and identity, but also by the collective values around protecting the planet and sustainability. And then the final one, we've done a few projects on this, so we've got some really nice examples of innovation, is around normalizing inclusivity. Now, this actually is pretty broad, and we really toiled over this one because we thought it was about neurodivergence. Then we thought it was about equality and diversity and gender balance, but it was really all of those. It was all of those. So we sort of took a big step back and realized that what's required is some element of repairing the damage of living in a system designed for everyone else. So this is gender, age, ethnicity, sexuality, physicality, your neurotypes, everything. Within that, we sort of deep dived into neurodivergence, which is a hugely trending area in terms of people's behaviors. And the numbers are pretty surprising that almost 30% of the UK, and this is just a UK example, we have other stats for around the world, 30% of the UK population are now considered to be neurodiverse. when you look at Gen Z, who currently are up to about 29, 30% of those are ADHD, and a third of those have compulsive spending disorders. I mean, the minute you narrow this down on people's relationship with money, it gets super interesting. And then when you think about regulatory developments such as consumer duty, you start to think, well, hold on a second, there's an opportunity to innovate here. If a third of the population are neurodivergent, and the challenges we're having is in being able to deal with systems and sequencing and the way that information is presented to us, then that's low-hanging fruit. Let's get all over that. The resulting trend around normalizing inclusivity, the shifting behavior, is very similar to the one before, which is this need to have agency and feel safe in being able to navigate new services. And the overall need is transparency. It's enable me to trust you and the system. Or, and this is, I'm just quoting here, this isn't me, are you just another pseudo bank trying to screw me over? Which is one quote we had from our research, which did make me giggle. But you see there, Dharm, there's massive trends that have got nothing to do with tech. But you can see also that tech has so much opportunity to solve those.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing I like about it is that, they're great examples of how things are changing. And if you don't address the specific needs of those changes, you're going to lose those customers, right? And it's because they need that other thing, right? If you're a migrant or a refugee, etc., you need security and identity as part of your financial services. If you're in the aging population, you want, better financial management. You want the flexibility to handle a business as well as a personal account, right? So these are all like new needs that, the account that I had 20 years ago doesn't necessarily service anymore, right? So what I love about these trends is you could almost say, well, these are niches, but without any physical boundaries, these niches are massive. As you said, there were 35 million in one category. So I think you can really start to specialize a set of services around this stuff and drive greater innovation. I mean, I'm sure, when you looked at these trends, you would have identified some solutions or innovations yourself from your groups. I mean, in the interest of time, can you give us a couple of examples of things that came out of that, as in innovations?
Yeah, I can. I can give you one that was quite sobering, and then I can give you one that was just pure joy. And we'll start with the sobering one. We were looking at gender imbalance in financial services. We were looking at women, and we took a big step back and looked at, why are we in a situation where women are so disadvantaged generally around financial services? And sort of diving into this space, the fabulous student who took on this project, identified a behavior where most women are brilliant at day-to-day financial management. A lot of the longer-term investment planning is done by their male counterparts, their husbands, partners, whoever. And there's this scenario where generally men, unfortunately, pass on commonly a lot earlier than women. So there's this scenario where a woman becomes widowed and all her long-term financial planning has been done by her husband. And suddenly she finds herself being given this estate. Now, what's really interesting is that everyone talks about the transfer of wealth, and they talk about the transfer of wealth going from one generation to the next generation. This is a really interesting scenario where the transfer of wealth is going from the male to the husband to the wife, the male to the woman. And in that, there's no transfer of education or planning or strategy or understanding why that investment portfolio is being pulled together the way it is. 70% of widows will fire their financial advisor within the first year of being handed over that family wealth.
Why is that?
Because they don't trust their husband's IFA. The IFA is usually a male. They find that the male financial advisor doesn't understand what's important to the woman. And so the woman just says, right, you don't understand my needs, therefore I'm not going to work with you. But instead of there being a service to support women and what's important to women, which again, based on research, is generally education, family well-being, and there's a sort of a broad area around education. So health, education, family well-being, they retrench. So they'll just park it somewhere, and they will no longer actively manage that investment portfolio. So what this student Monica came up with was this service where we would work with wealth managers and identify women IFAs who better understand, like create a community around female IFAs who can start to advise women on what they should do with their newfound wealth, based around their needs, and create some community around that so that other widows can support each other as well. And then other widows can recommend female IFAs or even male IFAs, but who understand what the female investor is now looking for. So that was one really interesting scenario and really interesting market opportunity as well.
Yeah.
A joyful one was based around neurodivergence. And these were 3 fabulous students. And they were zoning in on the challenge of compulsive spending disorders with Gen Z. And they created a tool where they came up with 3 options. They also identified that Gen Z, large majority of Gen Z prefer their pets over their partners. So they created this tool where if you are sort of scrolling and shopping online, they would pause your shopping and a little cat would appear. And you can feed the cat and you can stroke the cat. So now they're weaving in the neuroscience of how to engage with your oxytocin and dopamine. Your dopamine is triggered by you shopping, and now they need to bring some oxytocin and serotonin in by having you care for something. So this cat appears and you feed it and you nurture it. That was option 1. Option 2 was slightly more aggressive, which was just so amusing to see. Option 2 was you get given a serene image of a lake and some mountains, but if you scroll away from that and carry on shopping, they blow up your basket. So literally, they run a piece of code that empties your shopping basket, which didn't get voted very highly for obvious reasons, because that would infuriate most people. But the third was super interesting. It's something that we would never have come up with because of the generation that we're in. The third option was, knowing how Gen Z think and where Gen Z are living and what Gen Z are doing, they came up with this option, which I called scratch the itch option, which was they would say, fine, buy the outfit, but you're going to buy it in the metaverse. You're going to buy it in a digital universe, and you're going to buy it with digital currency or digital tokens, and your avatar is going to wear it. So you get to scratch the itch. You get to buy the outfit. You get the dopamine hit. You get to wear it. You get the dopamine hit. Your avatar friends get to see you wearing it. You get the dopamine hit. The real money that you haven't spent that then gets moved into a part short-term, medium-term savings account for your deposit for your house and your long-term pension. Now, I thought that was super clever. Really clever.
Really clever. I mean, that goes fairly deep into understanding what drives people to spend in the first place, which is the important thing. I mean, I'd like to see a bank do that.
Well, we have those students available. They're keen to prototype their ideas. So if there's any banks out there who are keen to try it out, get in touch.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, and look, I have had the pleasure of interacting with some of your students, and they are some extremely bright minds. And what I loved about them is the freshness of their ideas. It's just so I wish I'd had them in the bank when I was working in the bank,
Absolutely.
But fantastic. Look, I'm sorry, but we have kind of run out of time, and I could carry on this conversation for the rest of the day. You know that, Cam, but it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, and really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much, Cam.
Thank you for having me, Dharm. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into Banking Blueprints. We invite you to stay tuned for future episodes. On behalf of our Season 1 host, Dharmesh Mistry, and the team here at Zafin, we're glad you're here. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.